Hi, good afternoon. Chuck Morse here at the Morse Force. You know, the other day, a relative of mine told me that she was disgusted and appalled by President Trump and his comments at a memorial event for the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Apparently, and this is something I'm talking about from secondhand here because I don't have firsthand knowledge of it. In the course of his remarks to this very distinguished family, he made a rather crude and kind of unpleasant reference to the number of children that the late Supreme Court Justice had, saying, "Oh boy, he must have been really busy," or something like that. You know, some kind of a slightly vulgar remark. And my very liberal friend was horrified by this. "Oh, isn't this horrible? What a terrible, terrible human being." I mean, you'd think that Trump was the most satanic, evil person ever walked the face of the earth, the way she was going on about it. And, look, what I have to say to that is that Trump has always had a rather unusual and peculiar and at times crude way of communicating. You can see this from reading his book, The Art of the Deal, going way back. But I think that we lose sight of substance versus style. The downside of his style is that every so often you cringe. It's embarrassing. You know, he could be petty, he could be mean, he could be vulgar. He can offend. Kind of an all-purpose offender, if you will. But the substance is really what they're upset about, because the substance is a president who is more honest than any in recent memory, and who is oriented toward accomplishment, and who has accomplished a lot. And that's what really bothers them, because they don't like what it is he's accomplishing. That is, people on the left. And so they focus on his personality peccadillos, which are kind of easy and cheap to do, rather than what he's actually achieving. The classic example is that he's got something against minorities because he might have made some rude remark at some point that can be cited. But rather than look at the substance, which is that minorities have been more directly enfranchised into our society under his brief administration than any previous combined. And that, his actual work on behalf of minorities, this is directly the result of his policies. This isn't just an accident. This isn't, liberals like to say, "Oh, well, the economy has fluctuations." Yeah, that's true, but you can point to a direct cause and effect with regard to his leadership. You know, after 8 years of Obama, when the economy was improving tepidly but generally suppressed, and in spite of Obama, suddenly the economy is booming. You have a reduction in onerous regulations across the board. You have a reduction in the size of government. You have a reduction in taxes, which puts more money in the pocket of working people. You have an improvement in America's bargaining position in the world with regard to tariffs, which protects American labor, protects American industry, protects American jobs. You have an opening of our natural resources, our oil particularly, with pipelines and with more oil production to the point where now the United States is one of the world's number one oil producers, and we're operating at a surplus. You know, these are all things that have improved our economy, and they are a direct result of the Trump administration. And yet they've improved the job prospects and the opportunities for minorities. And yet they're going to say, "Oh, he's got something against minorities because sometime last year he made some stupid remark," and this. I mean, really, it's what they don't like is the same reason why they hated Reagan, actually, in that he's proving that less government and less regulation and lower taxes and more individual rights and a greater policy of protecting the national interests is actually good for minorities because it's good for everyone. It's good for all of us. And I would contrast the speaking style of President Trump with that of previous presidents. I'm particularly singling out Barack Obama, only because Obama was very, very good at being slick. Everything he said sounded right. He looked right. He posed right. He carried himself well. He had a perfect family, a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful daughters. He did everything assumedly right, and he was, kind and nice and articulate. He sounded so brilliant, the way he would speak in such high tones. And yet, I prefer Trump's means of communication because if you listen to Obama's rhetoric, it was the classic language of totalitarianism. It was doublespeak. It was indirection. It was sophistry. There was nothing said bluntly. You didn't know exactly what he believed in because he never said it. It was all measured and manufactured and pre-conditioned kind of cant. It was French scholar Elaine Benescon called this the language of totalitarianism. Everything is almost a code language. It's indirect. And if you listen to it carefully, underneath all that indirection is a generally an anti-American, anti-individual, frankly, human system, a belief system that is animating that kind of language. And again, I'm not here to single out Barack Obama because other presidents have engaged in it as well. I would even say, to a certain extent, most presidents and most leaders, most liberal leaders, going all the way back to Wilson. It's you listen to this kind of talk and you walk away with it with a slightly sick feeling like, oh, he's so smart and he's so intelligent. You feel like you've been slightly talked down to, which makes you think it's even smarter than it is. And yet you don't have a strong sense that he said anything at all, because he didn't. Everything was indirection. So I prefer the Trump model. And I prefer the basic and at times crude and ribald talk because it's patriotic, because he does believe in putting the country first. He's in this for that reason. And so that's my response to my friend who was so appalled that he had made this crude remark. Fine. Maybe he'd do better without that stuff, but that's who he is. The important thing is the substance, what is getting done. And I hope that the American people don't lose sight of that. I think we almost did lose sight of it in this recent midterm election. And that worries me because of the whole, in a sense, cultural zeitgeist of Trump's movement is to move away from this sort of manufactured, politically correct means of communicating, because that communication is based on a lie. And we would rather have truth, even if it's not pretty all the time, than have an entire system that is based on lies. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great afternoon.